Tommy?
Good evening and welcome to the August 29, 2016 meeting of the Public Works Committee of the Abington Township Board of Commissioners. May I have a roll call, please? Here.
Here.
Here. Thank you. Our first order of business this evening is to approve the minutes of the July 6, 2016 Public Works Committee meeting, and do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. Any edits or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public Works Committee has 7 items of business this evening. The first is an update by representatives of Aqua Pennsylvania on their efforts related to PFCs and the safety of our drinking water. And for this item, I'm going to turn it over to Township Manager Michael Laffitte.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. Unfortunately, tonight we have several officials from Aqua PA here to present information to the board, update you on their efforts to address water quality issues in eastern Montgomery County. With us this evening is President of Aqua PA, Steve Taggart, Chris Crockett, the Chief Environmental Officer for Aqua PA, and Rob McNamara, Manager of the Eastern Division. At this point, I'll ask President Steve Taggart to come forward to address the board. The handout. Okay.
All right. Good evening, and thanks for having me here this evening. We also have Mark Luca here, who is our Vice President of our distribution operations as well. So we have a full house. I guess we take up almost half the audience. So.
Well, thank you for coming.
Before I even get started, since this is a public works, I want to say how appreciative we are of everything that Abington Township does with us in our main replacement program and so forth. You guys are terrific. I think we have a great partnership with repaving programs and so forth, so I wish every township were as good to get along with and cooperate with. So I really appreciate that. Thanks. So I'll fill you in a little bit on what are PFCs, or perfluorinated chemicals or perfluorinated compounds, whatever people may refer them to. And they're known as PFOS or PFOA is what you'll see in most of the information that's been going around. And they're found in a variety of different things: Teflon, Gore-Tex, Scotchgard. But obviously in this area up here, the major issue is the firefighting foam that's happened at the Willow Grove Naval Air Station, also over in Warminster as the Warfare Center there, and there's some other sites as well that we think are starting to come out. So what's happened and what have we found? So in 2012, EPA issued their next what's called UCMR, which is Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. It's the 3rd revision of that. So in 1996, Congress put in the law that EPA every 5 years comes up with a list of 30 contaminants or 30 or less contaminants that they want water providers across the country who have a population of 10,000 customers or more, or 10,000 population, to come up and take a look at these contaminants, and the companies have to look at that. So in the 2012, these PFCs were one of the contaminants that were listed. So we did our monitoring 2013 through 2015, and we came up negative through the EPA required methodology at all of our sites throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. All but one was positive. There was one up in Bristol Borough, or actually Bristol Township, that was positive, a well system up there at 26 parts per trillion. Everything else was negative. And as everybody surely has read, everything that's going on both in Horsham and Warminster, Warrington, recently up in Plumstead, Doylestown Township, Buckingham, all these communities have been finding it in their drinking water. So we sell a lot of water to Horsham Water Authority. So we sell about 225,000 gallons a day, and over the last year or so, we've been selling them about 400,000 gallons a day to make up for some wells that they've taken off production. So in April, Horsham came to us and said, can you just give us proof that you don't have any of these PFCs in your water? And we said, sure. We came up negative the last 3 years. We'll do that. Now, the testing that we did is much more sophisticated than the testing that was required by EPA, whereas the requirements could sample up to, say, 60 parts per trillion. This new methodology can get up to 2.5 parts per trillion. So we did our samples at our interconnect with Horsham Water, and much to our surprise, they were positive. So they were somewhere around 15 parts per trillion that we were finding in water there. So then we took a look. We know what sources feed there. There's a well in Abington, there's a well in Upper Dublin, and of course our Neshaminy treatment plant, which is up in the Langhorne area that feeds off the Neshaminy Creek. So we took water samples there in April. So in April is when we tested at Horsham. It takes about 3 to 4 to 5 weeks to get these samples back. There's only a couple labs in the country that do this sampling. We got the samples result back in May, that they were positive, so then we sampled these 3 source waters and came up with positive at both at the Abington well, at the Upper Dublin well, and at our Neshaminy treatment plant. So since then, we've taken more samples. We're getting those sample results in now. They are all well below the EPA guideline. There's a health advisory limit that's set at 70 parts per trillion. And I'll let Chris Crockett talk about that a little bit. Since then, we've also tested our wells up in Chalfont. We've tested our wells in Peddler's View, which is up around off of 202, of those of you familiar with Peddler's Village. Negative there, but positive up in our Chalfont system. So on the map here, I'll show you a little bit so you understand what's going on. So Abington Township sits down here. This area here is the area that we cover in southeastern Pennsylvania here, or portions of it anyway. The Willow Grove Naval Air Station, our well in Abington, our well in Upper Dublin, and our water treatment plant all the way over here in Langhorne. So what we're finding is we've now gotten positive results at our wells in Chalfont as well. One well with a limit of 68. We took that well offline as soon as the day that we got those results back. But you can see Chalfont is about 5.5 miles from the Willow Grove Naval Air Station. It's also about 5 miles from the airport in Doylestown, which is suspected of the PFCs as well. So the PFCs are found in this firefighting foam, and they did testing upon testing upon testing of the foam up at the Willow Grove Naval Air Station. The hangars have basically foam releases that flood the hangars, and all this eventually runs into retention ponds on the area up there. We found it at our Neshaminy treatment plant, and basically the limits, what's happening up at the runoff from the Naval Air Station in Willow Grove, plus the effluent from the sewer plant in Horsham as well, because the customers up there have it in their water. It's not taken out in the process of the wastewater treatment plant, and it's actually running about 25 miles downstream and eventually getting to our treatment plant in Neshaminy. So we are now monitoring these sites every 2 weeks. We're taking samples, and again, it takes about 4 weeks or so for us to get the samples back. So I'll let Dr. Crockett talk a little bit about the PFCs, and then we'll tell you a little bit about where we're going and what we're doing with it. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Dr. Chris Crockett. I'm our Chief Environmental Officer for Aqua America. And I just wanted to walk you through some of the results. First, the engineering stuff and the science stuff gets a little crazy. So just to put some of the numbers in perspective, people always ask us, what's a part per trillion? So a good way to visualize a part per trillion is a grain of sand in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So that's a good way to explain to you literally the needle in the haystack that we're looking for when it comes to sampling for these chemicals at very low, very trace levels. As Steve mentioned, the perfluorinated compounds for firefighting are very persistent in the environment. They've been used since the 1950s. We've sampled 15 of our locations in the southeastern PA area. Other than Peddler's Village and one other location, all of our other sites, Hatboro, Chalfont, our wells in other locations, the Neshaminy Creek intake, have all been positive at trace levels of this. One thing to note, and one of the questions we get is, well, what does this mean? So the EPA created a health advisory. That's where they determine, is it above or below a level that is a concern. Now, one thing we need to explain is this chemical is not regulated, so it doesn't have the traditional maximum contaminant limit that EPA sets. They haven't gone through that process yet. So they've determined a short-term health advisory in 2009, which was 600 parts per trillion. And so here I'm going to fill you in on why this all became very very contentious very quickly. At the same time in May, when Horsham was analyzing its samples with the new method that looks very, very low at 2 parts per trillion, at the same time we were asked to collect our samples at the very, very low detection method in May, April and May. EPA lowered that health advisory limit by a factor of 10 almost, down to 70 parts per trillion for a lifetime health advisory. So 2009 was a short-term exposure. The 2016, May 2016 health advisory limit was based on being exposed over 70 years to this chemical, and it was a lifetime exposure. And the way they figured out how the dosages work is they assumed from their studies that 80% of the exposure that you get this chemical, the dosage that you get of this chemical, comes from your home and the environment. Only 20% of the dosage that you're exposed to from this study is from drinking water. And just so you know, if you're worried about these chemicals, when they've studied and collected blood samples in the United States, 98% of the blood samples in the United States come back positive for this chemical. So they lowered that health advisory. People were sampling, now picking it up, now detecting it. But again, all of our samples that we've collected at Aqua have been below that health advisory for our active sources. The only site where we had a result, and you'll see it on the sheet, that was anywhere near that 70 was in Chalfont. And the day we got that result, within an hour, we had that well offline and working on an emergency interconnect to North Penn, North Wales. The interesting thing about that site is we only have one sample. We went back and recollected another sample, and you'll see on the sheet that it went from 68 to 19. So we're working with very, very, very small levels of chemicals, and they can fluctuate significantly, potentially, depending on what's going on. We don't know if it's because Hatboro and Horsham and other places are taking wells offline. We don't know if it's because the plume is moving differently in the environment, or if it's because if it's a dry year and there's a drought, or if there's rain, what's going on with these chemicals. We only have one set of data, and we're getting more. And you're going to ask me, the next question is, why does it take so long to get a result? There were only 4 certified labs in the United States that could actually run this method. And very similar in other instances where this has happened, when people start detecting stuff, everybody starts sampling, they send tons of samples to the laboratories, and they get backlogged. The laboratory we send it to is in California, and we can wait anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks for a result from that laboratory. The same thing happens with EPA, the same thing happens with everybody. So these are things that we're trying to figure out how to get better results and quicker results. So it might seem like it's been a long time. We have a couple dozen results on the table there. We've collected over 57 samples ourselves, and we're going to be collecting almost 24 samples every 2 weeks. But our real backlog is getting those results from the lab. We plan on posting those results on our website routinely almost every other week as we get them in or as they come in, so that we can make sure that they're available for you. Again, I want to reiterate that nothing we have detected is above the health advisory. Everything's below that health advisory limit, which is considered very protective. And again, it's not even the ultimate maximum contaminant limit that EPA would set, which could be a different number. So we've continued to sample those locations. We're going to continue to share that information. And I want to, again, reiterate, of the dosage that you're exposed to in your lifetime, only 20% is supposed to come from drinking water. The other 80% is from the things that are in your home and in the environment. So that just gives you a feel for how ubiquitous this chemical is. And it's not just a drinking water issue, but it's an issue everywhere. And it's the same as any chemical that was developed in the 50s. We always learn later that it was engineered a little too good. So I think that is really just the crux of everything I need to share with you today about the health advisory and our timeline. But that kind of explains why we had this confluence of events. The better sampling method, people detecting it, lowering health advisory, extra concern, am I protected, am I not? A lot of confusion, not enough communication, and so that's why we're here, to make sure that people are aware of that. And to make sure you're aware of our commitment to continue to share and sample. And a good example is in Chalfont, where we did see something near that limit, we immediately took action work with the township manager, township and borough folks in Chalfont to make sure that they were aware immediately when we found out, and that we were able to, and we also met with them and talked to them about it and met with the community. So we continue to take this very seriously. We know that your water, your family drinks, our family drinks, and we need to take this just as seriously as you would. Steve's going to fill you in on what we're doing next.
Okay, so just briefly, over the last month, we've been to Harrisburg. We've met with the Secretary of DEP. We've met with the Public Utility Chairman and Commissioners. We have a meeting in about a week and a half or so with EPA. Chris has been meeting with the Navy, the Air National Guard, and so forth. We actually have a contract operations with Horsham Water and Sewer Authority, so we're well aware of what's going on there. One of the problems that we have is we don't have enough data at this point for our sources and so forth, and as to what's going on. So when you look at this, this area in here, the Horsham and Warminster and Warrington area, what has happened is now they're taking about 2 million gallons or less a day out of the aquifer. Right, so we're not sure what's happening with that aquifer. Where's that water moving to? And this chemical kind of moves like an amoeba. It doesn't break up into little pieces and so forth. It kind of stays total. So we're trying to figure out what's happening with the groundwater. We're working with USGS in that. We've hired an engineering firm now, Mott McDonald, out of New Jersey, to come in and help us with this. They've got a lot of expertise in this, and they're putting their resources at it as well. So we've actually got their contract in 3 different phases. One is to look at 2 of the wells where we've had higher totals than we would like as to possible treatment there. Also, the next phase will be to look at our Neshaminy treatment plant, to look at possible treatment there. Not to say we're going to put in treatment. We don't know yet. With this summer, it's been very, very hot and low stream flows, kind of almost drought conditions. So we think that the levels in the Neshaminy Creek may be up a little bit. Well, we don't know what's going to happen when we have some heavy rainfalls. The dilution factor is there, but then also what happens with the runoff from the military base. Now, EPA has given the Navy 60 days. They're about 30 days through it now, 60 days to come up with a plan to retain the groundwater on the plant so they don't get the runoff, but we're seeing very high levels in the Park Creek there, which eventually goes into Little Neshaminy and then Neshaminy Creek. So that's a big part of what we're looking at as well. And then we just need to keep getting data and so forth, and then we'll make decisions as we go along. So I don't know if the group has any questions or not.
No, thank you. I'm sure the members of the committee and the board have questions. Let me start by asking, so for Abington Township, what are the primary sources among your wells for the drinking water that the residents in Abington use?
Primary sources are the Neshaminy treatment plant. We've got a well. We've got actually 2 wells in Abington. One well has come up positive at about 9. Well, it's on the back of the sheet. I'm trying to think where it is. Somewhere around 19 parts or so, I believe. We have another well in Abington that we have samples in. We have not received those results back yet. We have some wells in Springfield Township that we're waiting on results as well. So basically, we've now sampled everything this side of the Schuylkill River where we get source waters from.
Gotcha. Thank you. The members of the committee have questions. Commissioner Klein.
So the testing agency that you're sending to, how are they related to Aqua? Are they somebody that's referred by EPA? Are their test results sent directly to EPA or in conjunction? Are they sent to Aqua and
No, they're
EPA?
sent to us. So it's Eurofins Lab. They're out in California.
What's the name?
Eurofins, EUROFINS.
Okay.
And those results are sent directly to us.
So they're hired by Aqua to do the testing, and then they send the results back to Aqua?
That's correct. We collect the samples, we send the samples to them, and they send the results back to us.
Okay. And then at what level, you talked, the environmental engineer talked about the 70 parts per trillion as being a low level on the risk side. At what level does it become more of an issue with this chemical?
Below 70? or,
Well, they
I'm
talk-
not sure your question.
He mentioned that the 70 parts per trillion is the EPA has set.
That's what they've said is the health advisory limit for a lifetime limit.
Right, I think I remember hearing something that was a low level already. Is there a level that, at what point you get to where there's a high likelihood of a health risk? Or is that 70 parts per trillion?
That's the 70 parts per trillion, yeah. So they set that at a very conservative level. So they set that based on unborn children, pregnant women, and so forth. They set that level very low to protect them.
And is that a level they use countrywide, or is that just being used for this
That's
area?
countrywide by EPA. That's correct.
Okay.
As Chris mentioned, that was previously 600 for a short-term limit. It's now 70 as a lifetime limit.
And my last question is, do they have an idea of what, I don't know if half-life is the word, but do they have a length of time that this chemical exists in the aquifer?
It's about 5 years, the half-life. So this takes a long, long time to go away.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rothman.
Thank you for being here and answering our questions. I was just looking at the numbers on the chart we have here, and I see that there's only one time. Is that accurate, that there's only one time that the wells, the Abington Township well has been tested that we have results for right now?
That's all we have results for. So we should be getting results in very shortly for the second set of tests there.
Okay. I was just curious as to why some of the others are being tested more frequently. Is that because of the initial number being relatively low?
Yeah, the Chalfont well was because of the initial number. And then we've started retesting all the sources again.
Okay.
So you'll see some of them so we've tested, one thing we've done is to sample the Neshaminy Creek. So we've sampled it above Chalfont. We want to see what that water is above the borough of Chalfont, and we've tested in a number of sources, a number of spots coming down as well. So we want to see what's happening in that creek as well.
Mm-hmm. You good?
Thanks. The doctor mentioned quite a bit about drinking water. This is also water that we bathe in. Is there any concern to the skin, any kind of ingestion through the skin? Is there anything people should be taking precautions?
It's not ingested through the skin, so it's through inhalation of dust or food or drinking it.
Strictly
Yes,
drinking water.
That's correct.
And, Mr. Taggart, I just want to remind you something that you already know, that we pay for this water. Aqua water is not free, and we really have an expectation that what we drink out of our tap is really 100% safe. I understand that you're doing everything that you can, but I really think you need to do more. This is very distressing. I know it's distressing to a lot of people in Abington Township, and we don't even border Horsham. We have a buffer of another township. But this is really concerning to people. I hope that, and I'm sure that you are, taking this very seriously.
Yes, we are, and we are probably meeting, if not every day of the week, every other day, to look at what we've got, how we're attacking it, what we've got for samples and so forth. So we are taking this very serious, yes.
And we certainly appreciate your being here and giving this report, because this meeting is filmed, and this will go out to all of the residents of Abington Township.
Okay. Understood, thank you.
Other comments or questions?
No real question.
Commissioner Klein.
So one other question was, you're talking about, you were testing Aqua PA wells. What about private wells? How does there's still plenty of residents within this plume area that may have private wells. How do they go? Do you have an idea of how they go about it? I know there was a program for properties around the naval base that were either put on delivered water systems or they were offered to connect into the public water system. Do you have an idea of what those people would do as far as getting their own wells tested?
I think they can have someone sample it and test it for them, but it would be at their expense. I know DEP is so that you've got two different groups who are looking at this. So DEP is handling what's taking place up in Doylestown. EPA is the lead regulatory people that are taking care of the Willow Grove Air Base.
And I know you're not representing them, but do you have an idea of if somebody has a private well, what do they do? Because assumingly if they're within some of these hit marks that you're getting, that they're going to pick up similar testing results.
Correct, yeah. What they could do is to, they could contact us, we can give the information for the lab or for an engineering firm. I know Gilmore Engineering is doing some sampling for, I believe they're doing sampling for Ambler and for Horsham. But yeah, we don't do private samples.
And when you say they're doing sampling for Ambler and Horsham, they're contracted with those municipalities to do private well testing?
I don't
What do
know
they
who's
do?
doing the private well testing. No, I think EPA is collecting them. All right.
EPA is collecting private well samples?
Yes.
So if somebody were to get if somebody had a private well and they
They
contacted
could
EPA.
contact EPA and see if they'll sample it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Farron.
Thank you. Just looking at these numbers, we can get a feel for where I'm right here. Talking, right, hello.
Sorry, ready.
Oh, okay, I couldn't see your mouth moving, I'm sorry.
We can see where the numbers are in comparison to this kind of local geographic area, but do we have any idea where this area stands in relation to other parts of the country in terms of levels of contamination?
No, we do not.
Is there any
So
way?
obviously, this is a concern anywhere in the country where particularly this firefighting foam has been used, right? So, our feeling, for our company anyway, is anywhere where there's an airport where they've been using these foams or where there may have been a plane crash, it could always be a place where there was a tanker spill and foam was used. So, it's all over the country, though.
But we don't know where Abington or this geographic area stands in relation to other parts of the country.
No, I don't have that information. I don't know, Chris.
As they're sampling throughout the United States, so for example, we talked about that national EPA analysis. Really, this area didn't.
Can you go to a microphone, please?
As Steve mentioned earlier, they've looked nationally for this chemical with a very, I would say, a limited telescope. They couldn't see as far as they needed to. And when they did that screening analysis, there were positive samples in California, Colorado, East Coast locations. They tended to be co-located in areas where there were military bases. Now, with the new improved ability to detect at lower levels, people are going back. But in that original data set, we didn't have any detection, so we don't have the other people's data, but we didn't have anything to suggest this area was any different than anywhere else. But now, nationally, they're going back and studying this chemical, and they're finding it pretty much anywhere near a military base where they look for it.
And how far back are we talking? I mean, you said 2009. Does it go
They-
before
we
that? Is that
started
really?
sampling our sampling was 2012 to 2015, and we weren't looking any different than anywhere else in the country. In fact, we weren't detecting it from our samples. But there were places from that 2013 to 2015 sampling out in California, out in Colorado, and in the southern states and other northeastern states that they did have detections, and some were over the 70 at that time. But again, that was because the limit was 600 at the time, and so it wasn't a concern until May when EPA changed that limit.
Okay. And at what point do you think you would have enough data to get a trend in terms of the quantities?
Well, we're working with EPA and DEP to get a handle on what they're finding, and they're doing hundreds of private wells
Right.
and, looking at other sources. So we're kind of hoping to work with EPA and DEP so they can put that in perspective to the larger region, because we only have one piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
They have all the other pieces, and we've been meeting with them, and we have another meeting coming up with EPA to kind of share this information, make sure they're getting our information so they can start putting that together. But, again, you'll find, you'll search Hoosick Falls, New York, you'll find Colorado, again, number of communities where West Virginia and others where they found this chemical in the groundwater at much higher levels.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Rothman.
I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but for the people who don't know the answer or are watching at home at a later date, can you explain what 70 parts per trillion over the course of a lifetime means?
Okay, so that's a good one. So what happens when EPA makes a regulation or tries to come up with a health level? That 70 parts per trillion, what they assume is that you are drinking water 8 glasses per day or 2 liters of water a day that has 70 parts per trillion or 70 grains of the sand in the swimming pool every day for 70 years, and over that lifetime health advisory, that there could be some increased risk of an impact for a sensitive population that they're using is developmental impacts for birth impacts for women that are nursing and skeletal impacts and things like that. They're also looking at long-term cancer risks. But typically this case, they used developmental effects for children, but they look at this over a 70-year impact.
And a separate and maybe obvious question, but I know people have asked this, so it's good to get an answer out there. People at home that might be using some sort of filter from the refrigerator or a Brita, does that have any impact on this?
That's a great question. And actually, in the handout that we provided towards the back at the bottom, it's like the last paragraph, it provides information there, and you can see it on our website as well. This specific chemical has not been used as part. So when you get a Brita filter or one of those refrigerator filters, they come NSF certified, which is National Sanitation Foundation. Okay, and they put it through a series of tests for removing different chemicals from lead to Giardia or cryptosporidium or whatever. Okay, in this case, they have not done the certification testing yet for this chemical, but they are going through it, and they've done some original studies in Minnesota that suggest that given the type of chemical that it is and the way it's set up, it probably, because we use carbon to remove it, will stick to carbon, and therefore filtration systems, home filtration systems that use that carbon filter will probably be removing it as well. Now, right now, they just can't quantify, is it 50%, 90%, 99.999%. But that's what they're going through the studies for now. But it definitely won't hurt if you use one of those devices. And they're indicating that it'll probably work as well. They just can't tell you how well.
Thank you.
And the trick to that is that people change those cartridges.
Right.
So if people do decide to put in a Brita filter or particularly with a refrigerator, people need to change them, manufacturers.
Brita thanks you for that statement.
So you had mentioned with the testing at the Chalfont well, it's 68 parts per trillion. You took it offline.
Right.
So what is the trigger point for Aqua? I mean, how close is too close to
We're
that
looking
70
at
part?
anything above 40 is going to give us some concern.
Right. So
And watch it very closely.
So in that case, so the wells in Hapro that were at 46 and 49, what's the game plan there?
That's part of the engineering study
It
that's
is.
being done. The first phase of that is to
Okay.
take a look at that. So, a lot of questions we've had, well, why don't you just, you know how to take it out of the water, why don't you just go ahead and take it out of the water? It's not that easy. So you've got to run testing on it. It can change the pH. It can change a lot of different things in the water. And much like Flint, Michigan has turned this whole industry upside down, Flint, Michigan made a change in their water without looking at the repercussions of what happens elsewhere in the system. So these are the things you have to do. You have to go through permitting with DEP. You have to make sure you have the space to do it. You have to look at what your backwash is from these filters and so forth that you put in. So there's a whole lot involved with it. It doesn't take place in a month or 2 months. That's it. We've gotten a head start on it with hiring this engineering firm, and we'll move along with that. So we feel the need to put treatment in. We'll be well ahead of the ball.
Okay, thank you. Are there other members of the board that have comments or questions? All right.
I just want,
Commissioner Gillespie.
thank you. First of all, I just want to reiterate what Commissioner Myers said, and of course, we're all concerned, and we know that. And I want to thank you also for coming in this forum. I did go to Horsham, to the one of their meetings, and this really works a lot better because we can really get the information. It was so crowded, and so this really works well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.
Second.
I just crossed your.
Okay. We will move on to PW2. And this is a motion to approve and enter into contract with Tamco Construction Incorporated for the demolition of 1004 Urban Road in the amount of $33,600 to be funded by the 2014 bond issue, and I so move.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee? Other commissioners? Any comments from staff? Members of the audience? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. PW3, and this is a motion to approve final payment for the Tennis Avenue, North Hills Avenue, Fairview Avenue Storm Sewer Project to N. Abenizio Contractors Incorporated in the amount of $11,802.65 to be funded from the 2015 HUD program, and I so move.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee? Fellow commissioners? Any comments from staff? Members of the audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. PW4, and this is a motion to approve final payment for the Rockwell Road Sidewalk Project to Biazzi Landscaping, LLC, in the amount of $2,300 to be funded from fund balance, and I so move.
Second.
I want to just take a moment again to thank the members of the committee and the board for their support of this project. The sidewalks are complete. They look fantastic. They have dramatically improved walkability on the road, coupled with the four-way regulated intersection now at Rockwell and Rubicam, and it is safer for the residents, so thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? Fellow commissioners, staff, members of the audience? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. PW5, and this is a motion to adopt ordinance number 2124, adding 1908 Paper Mill Road to the Old Welsh Road Sanitary Sewer District, and I so move.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Commissioner Klein.
Mike, has Tim gotten anywhere with the golf course for the northern side of Old Welsh?
We're still working with them on the issue. We haven't resolved all their issues yet. I'm not confident we're going to get a runaway from them. So we'll
You are not confident?
I am not confident.
Okay.
I think they're leaning on not giving us the right-of-way. The only alternative would be that the homeowners on the other side of the street could put in plants and pump up to the system if we can't get them by gravity.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Comments from staff? Members of the audience?
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. I assume then you're going to have to also, I guess you'll add this bid for the appraisal to the bunch. So the issue that I had with the appraisals, as you know, that the appraisal probably shouldn't have been much more than $1,000, and they were in the $2,000 and $3,000, the bids, and ultimately close to $2,000 accepted. So what I did is the people that I had spoken to that gave me the information about that being pretty darn high, they suggested that if I got the RFP, that would give them a good guideline. So the papers that I got after I first was told that there were no responsive papers at all, okay, I finally got a whole series, an email chain that basically was theoretically how the RFP went out. So in what's a $56,000 or thereabout project, an RFP should have some form and substance. And I would still like to ask for some RFP with some form and substance. So perhaps it's going out again for this, I don't know. But I would certainly like to hope that my commissioners would encourage the township manager to provide me with an RFP of form and substance so that those people could see what it was. There was no specific RFP in those documents. There were emails back and forth going, how about we add this, how about that, here's the map. And it just does not seem like a proper way, first of all, to operate. It led to some very, very high bids and some very casual figures going back and forth, and it really needs to be pinned down on behalf of the residents whose tax money you're spending. Thank you. And I'm actually asking for some action. I'm hoping that the manager will be directed to please allow a specific RFP for that project to be released. Thank you.
Commissioner Hecker.
Commissioner Klein.
This project, because we're not doing the north end, doesn't have, do we have any appraisals going on? Because all this stuff is being done right away, correct?
Still believe we need some appraisals.
We do
for
need
the-
some on certain properties, so it is moving forward.
And I think, didn't we have like this conversation 5, 6, 7, or 8 times about RFPs
And bids and...
and how unfair it is that there was a mischaracterization as to what happened, especially if you go back and listen to the other conversations that we've had about this?
And saying a very specific RFP as well. These are benefit assessments.
Right.
And any appraiser, like I think on day one, they learn what a benefit assessment is. So all you need to do to say to an appraiser, any appraiser worth anything, is we need you to do a benefit assessment on
Right.
28 properties. And we don't need to define benefit, we don't need to define properties. They know exactly what that is. $2,000 is an incredibly reasonable price, and anyone saying this should be done for $1,000, I'd love to speak to those appraisers, because I'd love to maybe employ them in some of my other municipalities.
Right.
If they're only going to charge $1,000 for a benefit assessment, so it's most of what we just heard.
So once again, we're back to the same point, is it it's just a misunderstanding and mischaracterization is actually what we're needing in this situation. We're not dealing with a normal home appraisal for a loan or anything.
Correct. It's a
Thank you.
benefit assessment. It's a fairly straightforward appraisal.
Ms. Lehman, you've had your
Thank you.
time on this issue. This is not a debate, and
They
so, no.
misunderstood something, and then they
We-
mischaracterized.
We are not going to do this here. So
Okay.
I'm going to invite you to sit back down, and we're going to take a vote on this issue now. Thank you.
So a specific RFP would be.
You've made your point repeatedly. We'll now call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. PW 6, this is a motion to adopt resolution number 16-029 to authorize the Township of Abington to submit an application formally requesting a grant of funds from the PA Small Water and Sewer Program for 2016, and I so move.
Second.
Any comments or questions from members of the committee? Fellow commissioners? Staff? Members of the audience? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And finally, PW7, and this is for information only. This is an update on the right-of-way acquisition efforts of the Township Solicitor's Office on the Edge Hill Road Tyson Avenue project, and I will turn this over to Solicitor Clark.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. And you are correct, this is for information only, but depending on how things proceed in the next month, we may be coming back to the board in October seeking some action. As the board recalls, over the last year or so, we have been preparing, working with PennDOT for the Edge Hill Road and Tyson Avenue reconstruction project. Back in January of this year, January 27th to be exact, a community meeting was held at which my office, Mr. Powers, and notably Commissioners Gillespie and Zappone attended in order to hand out the packets to all of the residents who are impacted by this project. There are 212 properties that are impacted, and for the last 7 months, we have been working with township staff, PennDOT, and Pannoni in order to get the right-of-way agreements on these 212 properties returned. To date, we have 19 have not yet gone out. There are still some that are being changed in the scope of the project. There are some called strip appraisals, which we are still completing. 143 property owners have returned the settlement documents. That means, for those of you who don't want to do the math very quickly, that 50 have not returned. 50 property owners have not returned their packets, have not returned their agreements. When we met with the property owners back in January, and in every subsequent communication we have had with them, we've made it very clear that this project cannot move forward until we have what we call site control. In other words, until we have either signed agreements or a court order on all 212 properties, the project cannot move forward. And why this is extremely important is that the funding is available now from PennDOT. The funding is, whether it's for 2017 or 2018, the funding is available. If we are unable to acquire all of the necessary rights of way and have all the agreements signed, there is always the possibility that this funding could disappear. And if it disappears, it may not come back until 2019, 2020, 2021, or it may never return, depending on how things go. PennDOT likes to put their money where things are shovel-ready, and shovel-ready means site control. We have begun the process of contacting property owners who have not returned their packets, not returned their documents. PennDOT requires that we have 3 contacts with them where we alert them that if they do not return the signed agreements, then the township may need to seek judicial intervention through filing of a declaration of taking through eminent domain in order to acquire these properties. As I mentioned, we have 19 packets that haven't gone out yet. We're not talking about those. Out of the 50, there are a few who we're working on little items with them, and we think we'll be able to get those wrapped up. But there are a fair amount of people who have either indicated they have no intention of signing or they are just completely not responsive. So out of that 50, and in light of the fact that we would not want to file 45 or 50 declarations of takings all at once, we will probably be coming to the board at the October meetings asking for the authority to begin to file the declarations of taking on these property. We need to stagger them again, because trying to do all 45 or 50 at once would be difficult. And in light of the timetables for filing a declaration of taking, it can stretch out to 3 or 4 months before you have a resolution regarding title to the property, and we don't want to push this far. So hopefully some of the residents are maybe listening tonight, and they realize that by not responding to us or by saying they're never going to sign, it doesn't mean that we're not going to eventually get the ability to use their property. It just means that we're going to have to seek judicial intervention to do it. Georgianne Fusco from my office, who's taken the lead, continues to work with all of these property owners, continues to reach out to them on an almost weekly basis, and continues to work with Pannoni and Mike Powers' office to try to reach all of these residents. So hopefully, maybe we get all 50 returned by next month, but if we don't, we'll be asking for the authority to file a declaration of taking on the first group of properties.
Thank you, Solicitor Clark. Are there any comments or questions? First from members of the committee. Commissioner Myers.
Thank you.
And then I'll get to everybody.
Mr. Clark, the reason you said that some say they have no intention of responding, are they giving specific reasons as to why they have no intention of responding?
They are. And some of them range from, I don't like the idea that you're taking down this tree that's in front of my house that I've always liked. Some who are saying, I don't want the property, I don't want sidewalks, I don't want a curb, I like the way things are now. Some of them are just, other general issues along those lines, but a lot of them just are not responding.
Is it an issue of money with any of them?
Well, it might be, but what we always tell individuals, that is, if you want to dispute the amount of money that is being offered, you are still permitted to do that. There is still a mechanism to dispute the amount of money that you are being offered while still giving us the easement that is required to do the work. And we, again, try to alert everyone to that fact that if we file a declaration of taking, we'll say we get the easement and also we're going to give you this amount of money. You can dispute the amount of money at any time, even after the easement is signed. When we've told certain people that, some of them have signed. When we've gone over the documents with everyone, a lot of them have signed. When we show them how the appraisals were done, how we arrived at this amount, what the amounts are, but you can dispute the amount of money but still sign the easement. And they're all, as you can probably guess, with PennDOT, there are a lot of forms, and there are forms for doing that, giving us the easement but still disputing the amount. We've actually had a couple of property owners who have not chosen to take any compensation for the taking. They've decided to donate the money, or donate the use of the property to the project, and are not taking any money. And once again, PennDOT has a form for that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gillespie, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just wondered, you said that some were just, there were a few that just are determined, like, how many is that? Can you?
I don't have that information right off the top of my head. I can get that for you. As I said, Georgianne Fusco from my office is the one who's dealing with all these, and she's categorizing. And very early on, we started to put people on a watch list of the people who just wouldn't talk to us, just wouldn't reply. I think those people are probably, this isn't an exact amount, a handful, maybe 5 or 6. I'm never going to sign under any circumstances. Some who just have objections to a tree being taken or a fence being moved or something along those lines.
And just like everything else, we all know that people don't like change, but once they get it, this is really a great project. Someday it will be done.
And I will say, again, with Mike's office and with Pinoni, they've worked very hard to accommodate certain people, and they've moved certain things, they've adjusted certain things, so a fence doesn't necessarily have to come down, or a tree doesn't have to come down, but in some instances, there's just no way you can do it. And Commissioner Gillespie, your point is a good one. This will eventually get done, and we will eventually get these easements. The problem is, for a lot of these residents, it may not get done for 4 or 5 years, and the problems over there will continue. If we can get all of these agreements signed, we can maybe get the project started faster than 2019 or 2020 or 2021.
Okay. Is there any way, should Commissioner Zappone and I speak to anyone? Is there anybody we could chat with?
I think that certainly is, and I think that's one of the things that Georgianne and I have talked about is her getting the two of you a list of who are some of the people who maybe you want to reach out to.
Lucky for me, I only have 50 homes involved in this. Commissioner Zappone, you have quite a few more.
And I did have several that I passed along to Mike's office that they took care of regarding a tree, a fence, and they, took care of it. So there was no problem. But then there was a few, I had a call over the weekend. The resident said if she don't get this or that, she don't want the project. She's not going to sign it. So.
Wow, thank you.
Commissioner Luker.
Yes, Michael, what's the deadline at which these 50 people have to respond to?
We are going through the PennDOT protocol regarding the 3 contacts, and when we have made the first minimum, what PennDOT calls a minimum contact, we've done the first minimum contact, we've done the second minimum contact, and we have to have a certain amount of time in between each. I think the 3rd minimum contact will begin sometime in the early part of September, and we are notifying everyone that unless we get the signed agreements back, we may be filing a declaration of taking in October. So
October.
it will come in the days.
Thank you.
Commissioner Klein.
Yeah. So, Mike, you think it's pretty likely that you're going to need the board's support for some declaration of taking? For us to be voting for eminent domain, it's sometime in October.
I think it's unlikely that we'll get all 50, and I think in a project of 212 properties, even just saying 10% is 21 properties.
Right.
So I think 10% wouldn't be bad. So I think there are going to need to be some declarations to take and file. And I'll tell you, Commissioner Klein, what happens often is once the paperwork gets served, once the sheriff comes and knocks on your door and hands you all this paperwork and you realize everything you have to do, very often people sign 2 or 3 days later. It's almost like they're waiting to bring it right up to the edge of the cliff before they sign.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners? Okay. Thank you, Solicitor Clark. That will end our official agenda for this evening. We'll now entertain any comments from members of the audience related to matters of public works.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. So the first thing I want to say is that was just incredibly disingenuous. This, if I could find somebody for $1,000 to do an appraisal, I'd like to have them work for me. Well, they are working for him on Tyson Avenue. Those 200 and some appraisals averaged about $1,100. So each. So if you averaged them out, they came to $1,100 each. And Mr. Clark, our solicitor, was also very, very explicit about how those Tyson Avenue appraisals were very, very much more complicated than the ones on the Welsh Road sewers. So the problem that we have is that we didn't have a standard RFP and send it out to a lot of people who were capable, because that was a simple benefit assessment. And it is something that just about anybody can do, as he said tonight. So that is not only disingenuous, but you twisted my words after I sat down. And I am really tired of seeing that happen over and over again in this township. The other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight is the spraying all the way up and down the state highways. That's PennDOT spraying, but it's not going to stop unless all of you get behind this for the residents that you serve. In essence, I believe that they are breaking the law. The law states in every chemical that they spray has an MSDS sheet. And the MSDS sheet basically says that it's a federal violation not to use the pesticide in accordance, and by the way, herbicides are pesticides, not to use the pesticide in accordance with the label instructions. So one of the instructions is that you are not to allow people into the treated area. Well, they can't drive down the road, not tell anybody that they're spraying, and keep dogs and children or anybody off of that area. People don't even know it was. Joggers go down the highway. One jogger went down the highway and nearly got sprayed. There's a newspaper article about it. The amount of destruction that they've done on places that had almost no herbs, didn't need an herbicide. They had nothing coming out over the road. They just sprayed wildly. And the thing that we're told that they're using, and we haven't nailed down if they're using the same thing in every township, but part of this is 2,4-D, which is 1/2 of Agent Orange and is not innocuous, even though the other half was banned, period. This half is not at all innocuous. And I'll read you this real quick right off of their sheet. Danger, harmful to humans and domestic animals, causes, need my glasses, causes eye damage, harmful if swallowed or absorbed through the skin. This is not okay. Not to mention, it's very toxic to fish, and all of this stuff goes down into our streams. We had a long discussion about how much we're spending to get all this stuff out of our streams. On top of that, once they make everything brown, they have to hire people to come and take the brown stuff away. So let them take the green stuff away, and yes, it grows back a little faster, but 90% of it doesn't need to be done, of what they sprayed. Only a little bit needs to be cleaned up. And if they come back a little more often, rather than poison everybody, so much the better. So I would like very much for all of you, please, to advocate for your residents.
Your concern is noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And also, I encourage the residents who are listening to send you pictures of what they have from their properties, because some of their beautiful trees and their shrubs and flowers also got hit. Okay, so I appreciate that. And they can send it to me at Abington Citizens, too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the audience? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Thank you.
It's a call to order the Code Enforcement and Land Development Committee meeting for August 29, 2016. And may I have a roll call, please? Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
All present and accounted for. First, a motion to approve the minutes of the July 6, 2016 Code Enforcement and Land Development Committee meeting, and I so move. Second. Been moved and seconded. Any comments, corrections, or additions to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Tonight, first, we have CE1. This is subdivision SD 1605, Patrick Deacon, 2661 Mount Carmel Avenue. This is a motion to approve the subdivision application of Patrick Deacon, applicant of the property located at 2661 Mount Carmel Avenue, Abington Township. The applicant seeks approval to subdivide the property into two parcels. Lot number 1 will contain the existing dwelling and is listed at 13,313 square feet. Proposed lot number 2 is plotted at 7,000 square feet, and the existing barn is marked to be removed. The properties are zoned, I'm sorry, did I read that? 7,500. I'm sorry, 7,500 square feet. Thank you. And the existing, that's proposed lot number 2 is plotted at 7,500 square feet, and the existing barn is marked to be removed. The properties are zoned in the R4 Residential District in Ward number 6 of the Township of Abington. This application was submitted as a preliminary final plan. However, due to DEP requirements for either an approved planning module or an approved Act 537 exemption application, this application will be reviewed for preliminary approval only, and the application subject to conditions and waivers as listed in the agenda, and I so move.
Second.
Mr. Deacon is here. Mr. Deacon himself is here, the applicant.
Start off and explain the title.
Okay. My name is Patrick Deacon. I reside at...
I thought you were going to be over by the...
He is going over.
Right, so you can use that mic when you're speaking at the podium. You can handle it over to the... because of feedback.
Okay. My name's Patrick Deacon. I live at 782 H Avenue in Ardsley, Pennsylvania, and I am the applicant tonight. So I guess I'll give you a brief rundown of what our intentions are and answer any questions you folks may have.
That would be great. Thank you, Mr. Deacon.
Okay, I believe everybody has a copy of this plot plan, and basically the property in question is listed as Lot 2, and we aren't really seeking any dimensional variances here. The square footage that is required for a building lot is 7,500 square feet. We will comply with that. The lot width minimum is 50 foot, and we're providing 60. The lot depth minimum is 100 feet, and we will be requiring providing 125 feet. Front yard requirement is 20. We'll comply. Side yards are 10. We will comply with that. The rear is 25 feet. That's a comply. We're in compliance with building area, impervious coverage, green area. So it's pretty straightforward. I've also provided a rendering of what we would potentially be building there. On one of the sheets, we actually depicted the home that we would be building, the driveway. I think we've done that to demonstrate that we provide the required 2 off-street parking spots, as well as having a garage. We provided the stormwater calculations to indicate a reduction in sheet flow, and the method of collecting the runoff the downspouts will be tied into a dry well. So I don't know if that's enough of a demonstration. but I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions.
Ben, if you may, before you guys go any further, there were two items listed within the agenda item tonight that the board will need to, the committee will need to consider. One, you're listed on here for the waiver for the street tree. The waiver is not for the planting of the street tree, it's strictly for the waiver that the street tree has to be planted within 5 feet of the front property line. The street tree will be planted, however, we would like to have the waiver granted to allow it to be planted 15 feet into the property. That's for a variety of reasons. One, it allows a little bit more freedom to the potential owner. Two, speaking with Mr. Michelow after our last meeting, our subdivision land development ordinance was written in 1991. Sometime in the late 90s, PICO and Aqua started running all the utility lines in plastic instead of what was in the ground. And we've all seen what PICO does to trees that get near their power lines. By planting the trees deeper into the front property yard, one, we don't think they'll have effect with any of the public utilities that are run in and around the sidewalk area. And two, we're hoping they survive a little bit longer. The other item that's in here is, at the very beginning, we had it listed as a preliminary as final. In talking with the township solicitor's office, that was done because of the requirements for DEP that all the EUs be approved prior to any recording of any plan. The board does have the ability to approve this as a final land development with the condition that the plan not be recorded and any permits issued until either the Act 537 exemption application is received or a planning module is submitted and approved by DEP. So that's what I have, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Should we, Mr. Pennikel, should we maybe reword the waiver request then to be more like, if you go to CE2, we have the same waiver request, same applicant, which I don't mean to jump ahead, but it says the same applicant's required to plant one street tree 5 feet inside the property line every 50 feet, but here it says the applicant is only requesting that the waiver be granted to allow the tree to be planted within 15 feet of the front, or, and we'll just say of the property line instead of the required 5 feet. Is that
I would suggest we use the 15-foot language for both applications.
And did you, Mark, did you consider the Montgomery County Planning Commission's review comments, stormwater,
We've addressed the planning commission's comments.
the grading issue? How's that addressed?
Grading issue, there's an existing retaining wall that's on site. The stormwater management plan has been reviewed by the Township Engineering Office. The applicant is required to obtain a stormwater permit at the time that they apply for their building permit. However, with the grading of the plan, there's a small grade change of about 1.5 feet in the very beginning, but curb gutter and sidewalk are already in place there, so they won't be disturbing that.
So you don't, there's not going to be stormwater flows towards the house, the proposed?
No, sir, there's actually swales on both sides of the house to bring it around the building and direct it towards the on-site system.
What about their crosswalk comment?
I would tell you that we had that conversation last year. There is no requirement within our subdivision land development ordinance that requires anyone to install a crosswalk. In combination with our conversation with our public works director, he suggests that the county would like crosswalks. They could certainly put them in, and they could maintain them to the tune of the $300 or $400 a year it takes to restripe them.
I actually consulted with the solicitor on that matter, but it was a no-go, unfortunately. No offense to the applicant, who... Comments from other commissioners on the committee? Any other commissioners? Stephen, did you... It's your ward.
This area of, we consider it Ward 6 or North Hills, has been a lot of Blythe property through the years since, and Larry knows that, when I first became commissioner. And seeing this and adding this to that neighborhood is definitely an asset. There was probably 3 or 4 abandoned homes there now, and they've been refixed and and they look nice. Yeah, refurbished, and adding this to that neighborhood would be nice. Getting rid of those shrubs, I must get a complaint every year about how bad those shrubs are maintained. And I've gone to Larry several times, and there's nothing really we could have done about that. So to see this property being taken care of and something new going in there, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Commissioner
Thank you.
Kalinowski. Commissioner Gillespie.
Thank you. And I really agree about the tree being back further, because that's a really narrow road there now.
is.
And you think of a tree like real big, but when they're growing, I would think, how would that be?
Carol, I
Hanging
totally
in-
concur, and also
Be
the next
hanging in the street.
application is going to be the same one because it's a narrow street.
Narrow, yeah.
So if it's appropriate, I would make a motion to amend it for final, to issue final approval, subject to meeting the DEP requirements for Act 537, or the 537 planning module, and to amend the waiver language as discussed to allow the tree to be planted within 15 feet. And I so move.
Second.
And Commissioner Sanchez, it should also be noted that no building permits will be issued until the DEP issues those.
Right.
Thank you, Solicitor Clark, and I would incorporate that into my motion. And I so move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Well,
Whoa,
we'll
whoa, whoa. Wait
do the
one
whole
second,
thing
Patrick.
now. I'm sorry. So now, been moved and seconded. Any members of the public have comment on the application? Anyone else? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
All right,
Motion
Patrick, now you
carries. It looks like Mr. Deacon can stay nearby because next we, well, we have to read it in and then you can, but stay close. Because this will be a motion to approve the subdivision and land development application of Patrick Deacon, applicant for the property located at 2718 Moreland Road. The applicant proposes to subdivide the .64 acre site into two lots. Lot number 1 will consist of 14,658 square feet and contain the existing single-family dwelling and detached garage. Lot number 2 is proposed at 13,525 square feet and is proposed for development of a single-family dwelling. Both lots comply with the dimensional requirements of Section 304.3 of the zoning ordinance. The property is zoned in the R4 residential district in Ward number 8 of the Township of Abington. The motion is subject to conditions and waivers as listed in the agenda, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments from commissioners on the committee? And, we could maybe hear from the applicant first, I'm sorry. Probably want some background.
Okay, once again, I'm Patrick Deacon. I live at 782 Avenue H in Ardsley, and this is another property that we're involved in. This is actually, has always been two separate parcels. At some, and it's already has two separate parcel numbers and receives two separate tax bills. At some point, the existing owner, who still currently owns it, by the way, built a detached garage which straddled the property line. So in essence, what we're doing is we're relocating the property line, and we were going to comply with the detached garage. Your requirement for a setback there would be 4 feet. So that wasn't a random selection, that was to comply. And it leaves us with a very large building lot. It's just about large enough for two conforming building lots. So we have quite a bit of room. We conform to lot area, width, depth, front yard, side yard, rear yard, building area, impervious coverage, green area, accessory structures as well. I've also, with this particular plan, depicted a home to again, demonstrate that we'll conform to the stormwater requirements and the parking requirements. And this is probably even more straightforward than the previous application in that it's much larger and it only requires 7,500 square feet. Here, we also agreed to a street tree, and we were going to, again, push it back to 15 feet for, sight distance and to keep it out of the right-of-way and ultimate right-of-way. So, again, I'd be happy to answer any other questions that the board may have.
Do you have any commissioners on the committee? Commissioner Myers, did you want to?
Just a couple quick, I understand the lot sizes, and I agree with keeping the detached garage. The home that you're planning on building there, it appears it's a two-car garage, is that the plan?
That's what I'm depicting. Yes, I am depicting a two-car garage.
And then it looks like the driveway area in front of the garage could also park two cars.
That's correct.
Side by side. Okay, because that's really important. It's a very narrow street, and if we could minimize the street parking, it would certainly make it much easier for everyone to traverse that Fleming
Absolutely.
Avenue. Thanks.
Commissioner, just for the record, at the Planning Commission meeting, the neighbors indicated that they wanted the double-wide driveway and garage, so because of the situation on that street.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Commissioner DePlacido.
This question is for Mark. I know you'd mentioned about the crosswalk issue, and there's another one here. But this particular road, Westmoreland Road, it is a very busy road. And whether or not the county wants to pay for it, did Ed take a look at that?
Almost certainly. This was the one, Commissioner, we spoke about at length. Ed was vehement. He didn't want a crosswalk at that intersection. His concern was the speed of which traffic goes up and down Moreland Road. If you were there, if someone was in the crosswalk and you were trying to make the right off of Moreland Road onto Fleming Avenue, and you had to yield, his concern was with rear-end collisions. In addition to that, this intersection does not have handicap ramps on both sides that would allow pedestrian. I mean, basically, a sidewalk along Moreland Road, but no sidewalk at all along Fleming Avenue.
Okay.
So it just kind of tapers off and dies right at the intersection. And again, it comes down to there's not a requirement for a crosswalk in our ordinance. I understand the county's desire to make a more walkable, safe community. We just don't have the language within our ordinance at this point to enforce something like that.
I agree. And but with more houses being built, that means there's more people, and there's going to be more walkers. Is it worth Al Freed taking a look at this area?
Well, the problem is that Moreland Road is a state highway. Moreland Road, Commissioner Myers can tell you, about 6-7 years ago, Moreland Road was severely altered. By that, I mean PennDOT came in, they made a center turn lane out of Moreland, they reduced the width of the existing drive lanes that are out there. They put a lot of restrictive signs up that limit the movements up there. There's certain streets you can't make a left out of, or you can't make a left off of Moreland Road into some of these side streets. So it was recently studied, and PennDOT undertook what I think was a pretty aggressive approach to cleaning up some of the traffic issues on Moreland Road. We're lucky that sidewalk exists currently from Fitzwatertown Road all the way through Willgrove Mall site. But other than Coolidge and Coolidge and Preston Avenue in that neighborhood, which is actually down to 105, there is not existing sidewalk on that portion of Osborne, Fleming, Lukens, and that's the 3 streets. I'm out of streets.
You've got them.
Oh, yeah, Henry Avenue has no sidewalk, but.
So so you're granting a waiver for sidewalk here, you're recommending that?
Well, it'd be sidewalk to nowhere, Commissioner. I mean, they could literally run sidewalk along the frontage of these 2 properties on Fleming Avenue, but it would connect to a neighborhood that's completely developed as you travel up to the next street. So staff's recommendation was that you approve the waiver for sidewalk. I have no sidewalk across the street, and there was comment at the Planning Commission meeting from the neighbors that they don't want sidewalks.
They don't want sidewalks.
They're more concerned about limiting the number of curb cuts along that street, and the issue being not the drivers that reside on Fleming Avenue,
but the homes in front on Moreland have a very difficult time backing in or out of their driveways. So they literally park around the corner on Fleming so they don't have to try to go out on the Moreland Road. And that's where the overflow of on-street parking comes from. So.
Go ahead, Commissioner Glassman.
Just a comment. I think also on Moreland, people come up over that hill, and they're moving. So it's not even a place you want to go out and walk across the street. Sidewalks, and I understand, like Lucan's, there's no sidewalks, and people don't want them. I tried that in my ward. They don't want them. They don't want to take care of them.
Is there, back to the ramp for a second, is there an existing ramp at the corner of Fleming and Moreland on your side? There's an existing...
I believe at Moreland there is. I believe.
I think he's looking, are you looking at a pictometry?
I'm just looking at the plan.
Okay.
Can we check that out? It'll be...
Patrick, is there a ramp there?
I believe there is, and I think that was done when PennDOT, there's a medium in the middle of that Moreland in there also that would create problems with crosswalks. But I believe that was part of those improvements.
I mean, to cross, if you were crossing Fleming Avenue.
Fleming?
I believe right in this area here, I don't know if you can see that far.
Right. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a depression here. That's that's what I recollect.
But not to cross the street, to go
To continue.
east and west. East and
Just
west,
one
not,
way.
not north and
That's what
south.
the lady said. I thought she said that.
Yeah, to go east and west, not
Depression.
north and south. You get killed here. There was a very big accident. Got killed.
There's not one there. I imagine one should go in.
I'm sorry.
If there's not currently a ramp there, there should probably be one installed.
I think that should certainly be a condition. If it's
Yeah,
not,
that's,
it needs to be-
yeah, if it's not there, we'd like it installed. Motion to basically install a ramp at the corner of Moreland and Fleming in the event that there's not a ramp already installed. If it's damaged, just to fix it.
It's not shown on the plan, Commissioner, if there's a ramp there.
Okay.
Second.
So I'll second that.
All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Klein, did you?
I guess I would just contemplate the idea of putting sidewalks in. I mean, I understand that the neighborhood may not have them, but this connects into the neighborhood and then connects out to the sidewalks on Westmoreland. So, I mean, you got to start somewhere, and this is the reason why we have the stipulations in the saldo. So, is to continue. If we had no sidewalks on either corner, I would understand it, but we do have something to connect into here.
You have, may I? May I?
Of course, yes.
You have sidewalks along the length of Moreland Road. There are literally no sidewalks on the side streets, the arteries coming off of Moreland, except for small sections of Fitzwater Town.
So you're saying people don't want them back there?
Well, they've never had them, and these are not new homes. This will be a new home, but these are 60, 70-year-old homes, at least, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry, most of them are from the 1950s.
I mean, I'd certainly be in favor of them, but I defer to
I-
the ward commissioner. I mean, and it sounds like there was some discussion at the meeting that the neighbors didn't.
There was, and there was a neighbor that was in attendance that lives across the street from this development that claimed to speak for 5 of the other property owners that were unable to attend. And her contention was that we limit the number of curb cuts out here on Fleming Avenue and make sure that the proposed new home has adequate on-site parking, and she did not want sidewalks.
Right, but, I mean, I would only say that, we have it in the saldo, we talked about it in our comprehensive plan about making a more walkable community. We have a connection here. If this was in the middle of nowhere where there were no sidewalks, I'd understand it, but you have a connection to the sidewalk system here already on Westmoreland.
The only thing I would say to you, Commissioner, on that unless this neighborhood would qualify for some type of grant through Dan's office downstairs for the installation of sidewalk. The neighborhood is built out and completely developed. Not to be rude, I grew up a block from here, and the street had no curb and gutter when I was a kid. They didn't put that in until the 80s. So other than that, it was just a paved surface, no curbing or anything. So, it's in front of the board.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Thank you. Just one other comment. What I did find when a couple of people wanted sidewalks in a particular block in my ward, when the majority got wind of it, they didn't want it because they didn't want a tree moved, what side of the street you want to put it on, and it ended up a big, I would say, kind of a mess. So there thus are no sidewalks on Kelly Lane, because it was a big argument who was going to lose a tree and whose yard was going to be messed up with sidewalks. So that's what I found.
The only other item that I can add to this is when this plan originally came in, this was a conforming 3-lot plan. That's why it carries a land development application number instead of a subdivision number, because it was the development of 2 or more contiguous lots. Through meetings with the existing owner and a few of the residents, it's been reduced to a 2-lot plan, which is a single-family dwelling and 1 proposed new home. Of course, some of that was done in order to allow the existing garage to remain, but the other items the neighbors have asked for have been incorporated into this plan.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Zappone?
I have a question. You met with the residents here,
Yes, sir.
and Commissioner Myers, you met with the residents here. And what do the residents want, the residents that live there? What do they want?
They wanted us to address that this house have adequate off-street parking, which between the garage and the parking pad out front is 4 vehicles. They wanted us to limit the number of curb cuts so they don't lose additional parking for drivers. They wanted as much parking on the street as possible. And the resident was adamant, she didn't want sidewalks. So that's what I can tell you, Commissioner.
And we're complying with their request?
Yes.
Okay, so you met with them, Commissioner Myers met with them, that's what the residents want?
Yes, sir.
It's a no-brainer.
May I speak again?
Sure.
There was no request by a resident to put a sidewalk there. As Mr. Panikel stated, it would be a sidewalk to nowhere. It would be a sidewalk for the frontage of this property and the side of the existing home. So basically 2 lots, it would stop there, and if you walk down the street towards Old Welsh Road on Fleming, you have no sidewalk. That's all of Osborne, Fleming, Lukens, and the side streets like Henry, and you need to drive through this neighborhood to truly understand, and I certainly understand the trend of walkability, but believe me, for 50 or 60 years, folks have been walking that street without sidewalks and doing fine.
Okay. Anyone else? Members of the audience? No one else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Deacon. Next, we have CE3 subdivision SD 1603, Shelley and Nicholas Schorsch, 1580 Warner Road. This is a motion to approve the subdivision application of Shelley and Nicholas Schorsch, owners of the property located at 1580 Warner Road. The applicant proposes to subdivide an existing parcel of 7.86 acres in size into 2 parcels. Lot number 1 has the required lot frontage on Mill Road and is proposed to be reduced to 4.22 acres in total lot area. Lot number 2 is plotted at 3.64 acres in total lot area and has the required lot frontage on the private portion of Warner Road. The property is zoned in the R1 residential district in Ward number 1 of the Township of Abington, and the motion subject to conditions and waivers as listed in the agenda, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I believe we have Mr. Rose here representing the applicant.
Hi, I'm Nick Rose from Protract Engineering, representing the Schorsch family.
Could we have your address for the record, too?
Protract Engineering, Box 58 in Hatboro, Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Would you like me to just give you a quick rundown?
That would be great. Thanks.
You may actually recall this tract was actually in front of you before because this small piece of about 11,000 square feet was being transferred from, there we go. This small piece is being transferred from 1560 Warner Road to the big piece because Nick Schorsch and his wife were selling 1560 and wanted to give it a little more property that essentially went with it. So that was approved by the board. It has not been recorded yet. It's in the recording process, but it hasn't been recorded yet, so it still shows on this plan, but essentially that transfer has taken place. And all they're doing now is there's 3 pieces in a row here that are about 8 acres, each owned by the Schorsch family. And for estate planning purposes, they want to essentially split this middle one into 2 pieces. So this piece would keep all of the riding area that Dick Schorsch has. This property line is actually defined by a fence that's already existing. And then the remaining piece that's a little less than half of it would, actually a little more than half, it would be right here, has the frontage on Warner Road, as you read in your introduction. So there's no construction proposed or anything at this time. It's just essentially splitting a piece in 2 for estate planning purposes so that they can move it in the future or join it with other properties or whatever their estate planning people ask them to do.
Get out in front of the question that I know is coming on. So Warner Road ends there, and or not doesn't end, but it becomes a private road.
It is a private road at that point, yes.
So that's the nature of the request for the curbing and sidewalks.
Correct. They would definitely like to keep that, and that the country lane look that it has right now. They don't want to widen that or put curbs along it or anything like that.
And same, I assume, same for the street tree, which would just
Correct.
be kind of forced in what is a
exactly
kind of a country lane, as you described it.
As many of you may know, many of the Schorsch family members live back here. Peter's right here, Irvin, so it's a family sort of community back there, and they want to keep it as much as possible as it is now.
Okay. Any questions or comments from commissioners on the committee? Other commissioners? Commissioner Klein?
Yeah, so this is a 2-lot subdivision, but they're only coming in for the subdivision at this point. Do we have any ability to bind them for land development since they're staging this?
Commissioner, the best way that I could answer that question for you is I process and review the application that is presented to us.
Right.
Is it presented as a land development application at this time? In conversations with the applicant's representatives, everything that's been relayed to us is this is nothing more than a state plan.
Mark, bring the mic over.
Mike.
I'm done.
For the night?
So I guess, do we have any ability to bind them to land development? This is a 2-lot subdivision, and we've seen this before where, and I'm not saying that the Schorsch's are doing this, but where property owners come in, they do the subdivision first, and then they come back and develop the property somewhere down the line, and they're not subject to the land development process. And it is a 2-lot subdivision.
If you're indicating you'd want to place certain restrictions on the property after it's subdivided, you could do that. You'd have to have certain specific restrictions that you were referring to. But normally that is handled at the time the property owner submits a land development application. Because even if you were to do this and the applicant came back in 4 or 5 or 6 years from now, they'd still be able to have any of the restrictions placed on it waived or removed by the board several years. I guess I'm not sure what specific type of restriction you're talking about.
My understanding is they're subdividing it today, within the next month or 2 if they go back to record it. But if they come back in and want to develop this in a year or so, they don't have to go through a land development process. It just goes through a staff review process.
And that's the way it is. That's the way our ordinance is written. That's the way the MPC handles single lot
This is two or more lots.
Yeah, but if I'm, and forgive me if I'm mistaken here, but one of them already has a house on it, so they're subdividing a piece of property, and they would then just be later on developing the other parcel. No, that's incorrect. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, that's the solicitor. It is incorrect. The
Just has a
lot
barn.
number one is currently improved with an existing barn and a horse paddock. Although the existing barn has utilities in it, electric and water, it does not, it's not a living quarters. And lot number two, as it's proposed here, is currently vacant of any structures other than a perimeter fence.
So we're talking about two undeveloped properties. I guess my concern is that this stage process doesn't afford us the ability through the land development for them to come through the land development process. And that's my concern. Is there a way to, within our jurisdiction, to be able to provide or to require them to come back for land development when developing these properties?
You can make it a condition of your approval of the of what the applicant is seeking right now of the subdivision. You can make it a condition of that any development of the property would have to come back before the board.
Okay. And that would be something that has to be agreed upon by the property owner?
No.
Or we can impose that?
You can impose it, and if they're unhappy with, if the board approves it, and if they're unhappy with it, they're always able to take an appeal of your decision, but you can approve it with that restriction.
Okay.
It may be worth interjecting here. Both of these lots are actually far in excess of the zoning requirement for this district, which is just the 1 acre.
Right.
So in theory, if something were to occur down the road, I suspect it may involve more than, I don't know if your concern is just that one person comes in and wants to build one house on here or one house on here. If I were to guess, I would say that there might be something more involved in that, but simply because they're of such a large size, they could support multiple lots each.
Right. My concern is that I've received several phone calls from people that live on Warner, and they're concerned about what might happen to the property. And my conversations with them right now, they're only subdividing, they're moving lot lines. And there's at this point, there's nothing for us to react to from the town, from the commissioner side. And they were concerned about that.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you, you're suggesting a restriction that if a person did come in to build something on this, they would need to go through land development? Is that
correct?
Right. I have heard nothing from the family in regard to building anything, so I don't know that that would be a problem.
Right. And you said that there's a barn, there's a barn and there's paddocks in here. Are there still livestock on the property?
I believe they have horses there. I'm not actually sure that the horses are still there, but I believe they are.
Okay.
Want him to answer?
I was there last week. There were 3 horses here.
And does that meet the livestock ordinance for the property that will be made?
No, sir. You need a minimum of 3 acres, and once you're above the 3-acre requirement, the limit of 1 horse per acre.
Excellent. Okay. And then you have the shaded area on Mill Road off of the lot that's being put on Mill Road?
Up here?
Yeah, is that indicating steep slopes?
There's just a little section of steep slopes because there's an embankment there that goes down the mill. But we're not proposing any construction there.
So I'll make a motion to amend the motion to require the applicant to come through land development in the event that either of these properties are developed.
Second. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion's amended.
Thank you.
And any other comments on the motion from the public?
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. So these are my neighbors. So if they want it to go to land development, I want it to go to land development too, because that's where everybody gets to see what's happening and have a voice in how it may affect them. What was absolutely incredulous to me was the person who brought this up. who has just defiled the name of land development in Abington.
All right, this is drifting into what we call
I
personal
know,
attacks.
but we're talking about
it's
how
not
do you
relevant to this application.
require one person to go to land development while the other person who had zoning requirements to go to land development was absolutely excused from it, just like that, with no discussion.
Once again.
Well, tell me what they are.
Property owner has been completely excused from going to land development like that. Get your facts correct.
Okay, so tell me when the colonnade will go to land
No, I
development.
mean, it's not.
Okay, yes, could you move on to something else, please?
It's relevant to this item.
Will I be able to find out outside of this room?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fairly important. We brought it up at the appropriate meeting, okay, but didn't get any comment on that. But it has literally, and when I asked Mr. Lefevre, he said it's not going to land development. If I misunderstood, Mr. Lefevre, I hope will correct
Do
me
you have any
tomorrow.
comments relevant to the subdivision application?
Yes, I would like to see my neighbors have land development if they need it, but I don't know, after what I saw at the colonnade, how you can force anybody to have land development.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rose. Finally, we have CE4. This is a motion to approve the subdivision application of Brown Associates LLC for the property known as 302 Holm Avenue and the vacant property known as parcel number 3000079000008, fronting on Chancellor Avenue. The applicant proposes to relocate the existing shared property line and transfer 200 square feet of ground from 302 Holm Avenue to the vacant parcel. The lot area of 302 Holm Avenue will be reduced to 15,755.2 square feet, and the vacant parcel will be increased to 7,634.2 square feet. Both lots will conform to the dimensional requirements of Section 304.3 of the zoning ordinance for the Township of Abington. The vacant parcel of the property is for the development of a single-family dwelling. The properties are zoned in the R4 residential district in Ward Number 4 of the Township of Abington, and the motion subject to conditions and waivers as listed in the agenda, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and it looks like we have the applicant or the representative of the applicant here, maybe to give us a little explanation.
Sure. I'm Bill Kujic with Boundary Stone Associates. I'm the engineer for Brown Street Associates. The applicant's proposing to relocate the existing shared property line between the two existing lots 2 feet to the southeast. This will transfer 200 square feet from Lot 1 to Lot 2, which will bring the minimum lot area of Lot 2 in compliance. Lot 1 contains an existing family dwelling. Lot 2 is currently vacant, and a single-family dwelling is proposed. The two lots are within the R4 zoning district, and both lots will conform to the dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance.
Mr. Kujic, could we have your name, your address for the record, please?
Sure. It's Box 601, West Deptford, New Jersey.
Any questions from commissioners, comments from commissioners? Let's start with the committee first. Commissioner DePlacido.
Yeah, first thank you, Director Sanchez. I wanted to thank Mark Pennical for taking the time to explain this to me. It was, I didn't quite understand what the need was, and now that both lots will be able to conform, that's great. I just had one quick question that I missed, and I didn't get to ask you at the time. Since that is a dead-end street, I think there was a waiver for, was it street lights? I can't remember.
Correct. There is a waiver listed for streetlights.
Okay.
There's a streetlight across the street in front of 303 Holm Avenue. It's on the Pico pole as shown on the plan. However, there is no additional streetlight on either of the two telephone poles in front on Chancellor. So the telephone pole, Commissioner, if I can use this plan that's over here, give an existing street light now that's located here. on this pole that's here, this Pico pole. And there's another pole at the intersection and one up Chancellor Avenue farther. There's no additional streetlights on the.
It's not here, though. Okay.
Okay, the neighbor just wanted to make sure that we weren't moving it.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Panical, did you want to explain the nature of the street, too, or to have the applicant?
Yes, I'm sorry. The street itself is a paper street. It still exists as a township right-of-way. However, it's an unimproved township right-of-way. It currently has a gravel driveway that services the house at 302 Holm Avenue. What this proposal would do for you, or do for us, is to take that existing gravel driveway and replace it with a driveway 12 feet in width that would service the existing garage of 302 Holm Avenue and also the proposed new home that will be addressed to Chancellor. That driveway, after conversations with the engineering office, the stormwater management from that new paving would have to be accounted for. In addition to that, the applicant is here, and you can ask him. They've had conversation with our engineering office as to the construction of that driveway, so it would support either a refuge vehicle or a fire truck in the event that one had to access that area.
So it's built to the specs of, say, our public street, except for the lighting and the sidewalk?
Correct. It'll have the appearance of a residential driveway, however, it's within the public right-of-way.
You're supporting the waiver on street trees?
The street trees, and we can ask the applicant, he's here, if the waiver is the same that we've seen on the prior applications, if it's just they're going to plant it 15 feet in, or if they're actually looking for a waiver from it altogether.
Yes.
So he's here.
Let's ask.
There is a proposed tree shown on the plan. It's not shown on the sheet we have here, but it's not located within the 5 feet of the right-of-way.
And only one tree would be required under the street tree.
One additional tree would be required for the proposed new lot.
But once again, it's a waiver of the placement of the street tree, not of...
Correct. The existing house has an 18 and a 12-inch tree in the front yard as it fronts home, and there's additional trees along the Chancellor Avenue frontage.
Commissioner Klein.
Yeah. So if you go up the driveway that you're creating that's feeding these two parcels, lot 1 and 2, what's the nature of the property to the left? Does that have any possibility of subdivision? I can only see one side property line.
Right now, Commissioner, it's enclosed behind a fence.
Okay.
But as far as the total square footage of it, I haven't looked. I did speak to the current property owner, Mr. Phillips. He did contact our office. He just wanted to make sure that if this thing was approved, the township wouldn't come after him for improvements to his side of the unimproved Chancellor Avenue.
I guess my concern is if he has the possibility of subdividing the back portion of his property, what happens with his driveway that's now servicing just these two lots, 1 and 2? That's why I would like to know what that parcel outline is.
I could certainly find out for you.
If he was
an answer.
Okay, yeah, if he was going to do that on the other side, he would also have to add an extra 12 feet to make it at least a minimum of 24 feet of roadway if he's going to add another house back there and do.
But at that point,
subdivision
wouldn't the township be looking for the street to be constructed within our standards and dedicated?
It could do that, and you can ordain that. The township has the right to ordain that. Both sides would have to pay for those improvements to do that at that time, and that can be done, at a later date. But you have that right, to do that.
Right. So if somebody came in, once again, I have no idea whether this lot on the other side has enough room. It may just be a strip lot that has nothing to subdivide. But if that was to happen and they were to subdivide similar to this, we could, at that point, require them to construct the street and assess all four properties.
Sidewalks, the whole thing, and assess
all four properties.
That's great. You could go through it and ordain all that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Mike.
Any other commissioners? Anyone from the public? Hearing no other comments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. That concludes the formal agenda. open it up to comments from the public on general matters of code enforcement and land development. Name and address for the record in 3 minutes, please.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane, and I think we've done it again here where, you know, you have somebody at the podium and your interest is not in creating understanding. I have been through a zillion of those documents from the Colonnade. I first of all, cannot even wrap my head around those of you who voted to allow use and occupancies to go out before the fire equipment was finished. And in many cases, that fire equipment could take up to 3 months because of the permitting process, and 30 days after the permit, and then 40 days after this is installed. That is, you know, you've already had somebody in there when the building wasn't safe, and I believe that person may have put a lawsuit. That was hearsay. I haven't seen it myself, but I think they certainly would have reason to. The building was not safe when they went in, clearly. And you've done that again. And I cannot wrap my head around that. But this thing with land development that just happened is just another one of those where I watched in those documents as the intent of the zoning approval was that this property went to land development. I've never seen a property go to land development last. You usually don't close the barn door after the cow's out. You try and close it when the cow's in. So for people to have any meaningful opportunity to comment on a development, and I don't mean just people from the public, I mean our professionals who there is a great deal of evidence were ignored in this process. And a great deal of the lead was taken by the solicitors, and the two solicitors worked together to create what I think was absolutely, positively the cause of all the problems. And in this particular case with the land development, that also was at the heart of the problem, because you had so many buildings and so many, you had a deck, you had 2 giant skyscrapers, you had a brand new building that was being built all on one property, underground garage, brand new conversions from commercial into residential, all of that happening with fire systems that had to tie together, traffic patterns that had to tie together, parking that had to coordinate one with another, and yet you let that go. It's already at the point where they're talking about putting people in, and it's had no land development, and the land development was a condition of the zoning approval. Technically, in my opinion, they shouldn't have had any approval to build anything until they met the conditions, and that was the purpose. And that 1 car per unit is nowhere near enough.
Thank you for your opinions. Your time has expired.
Okay. I would like to see some response to the citizens on those kinds of travesties of our rules and regulations.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you.